David Hall, who made Virgo, and I were duly congratulated and went to the Arts Council and, shook hands. And we talked about. So my first instruction was, you'll be working down at the British Film Institute editing rooms, which at that time was in the Cut near Waterloo. And you should see this man, and he's in charge, and he'll, tell you and help you. So I went to see this person, and he said, sit down, and I've read about your film, and so just you tell me, I want it from the horse's mouth, what it's about. And I told him, and I said this and that, and I thought I was going to do this, and these are the ideas I had. And he said, good. He said, look, it's lunchtime. You go down to the Cut Market, and you buy 3 packs of plain postcards. 60, 70 postcards. He said, and what did you say in the name? I said, it's called Link. He said, Link, good. He said, and you said you wanted to start off by, he said, and then you do this. He said, look, if you can do a visual, draw a visual, and if you can't, write it. And then you said in the middle of the film, of course, what he was telling me to do, and I had no idea, it was a storyboard. I mean, I didn't know what a storyboard was. And he said, now you've got a camera. I said, no, I haven't got a camera, but I've got 2 good friends who, one of them, they've just bought a hand-cranked 60mm Bolex, and they said, oh, well, at least it's a start. Fine. What do you know about editing? No, I don't know anything about it. Come this way. This is the editing room, and it was tape to tape, and so, I started... the fact is, I became very good friends with that particular person, and I got friendly with his family, and he helped me so much. Didn't I luck out? It was Bruce Beresford, who, for those probably film people here would know, Hollywood. What is it? Morant, but
Driving Miss Daisy is one.
Driving Miss Daisy is the big Hollywood film,
you might know.
Breaker Morant was his first great Australian film. So I was so lucky, and I was guided by this just, marvelous person. So that was the making of the. The other thing that happened with Link was I learned so many things. I was sort of arrogant enough to think, well, I'll make the film and just put the sound on. Well, then I discovered sound libraries. Oh, wasn't that great? When I went to Bruce and I said, look, I want to start the film. I've got this idea. And he said, well, how do you want to start it? I said, well, I got a very different idea that I want to use a pumping station. And for some reason, I thought that was. So he said, well, you can get it in film libraries. And I said, what? And he said, well, library for books, library for... I said, oh. And that was a marvelous experience, because I was a perfect subject for anyone that worked in a film sound library, because I knew nothing. And because I went, and I said, well, I want, I thought I knew what I want. I want this pumping sound, and we got all the pumping sounds out of the library had, and of course it didn't sound anything like I thought it would sound. And I used to go back. I mean, I just loved going to meet these sound engineers. And the best experience I have, because there were so many, was, I don't know if you recall, in that film called Link, there's a marvelous section which I borrowed from the Saudi Arabian embassy, which I had to go to, which was the Kaaba at Mecca, that square cube covered by velvet. And the sound for that, I thought, oh, this would be the easy part, let's... so I went back to the sound library and said, look, I'll have a look at this bit. They said, well, what do you want? And I said, well, I want about, sound of 2,000 people circumnavigating the Kaaba. And they said, okay. So they said, and so we started off, and we tried to get markets in the Middle East, sort of quiet sound, and we tried so many things, and then we tried all the crowd sounds, but German crowd sounds, and it's very different from German. From French, you sound, and so we went for all the, and then they said to me, you can mix sound. Oh, and of course they loved it. I mean, so we had a day in which we just played with sound. And I think if you saw it now, it's very convincing that that would be the soundtrack of what that accompanied the visuals. But just for an experiment, that particular day, we tried, or they tried, to do everything. And you wouldn't believe that sound. Actually, it's a pub in Guildford on a Sunday morning when it starts off, and some person said, "Oh, Marjorie, what do you want? Gin and tonic? Oh, you're Frank. What are you having?" And we mixed it and trouble and double thing, and then we got other things in, and we got that sound. I mean, I think they wanted to prove to me that it could be done. So I decided to do collage with films. One knew what collage is in the art world, and I liked the idea. And the obvious thing, I wasn't setting out to make a narrative film. It was quite, I mean, so as I mentioned earlier, the film Link was based on a lecture I was doing around art colleges with slides. And as I said, I thought they'd make better movies. The second film I made, called Circle, my work was much more conceptual then, and I was trying to, the film, there were 4 sections to Circle, and it was circle, but not in the physical sense, the sense of starting from one point and going through the other. The first film started off with an airplane going through, and we came down, and there was I was so lucky to have such a marvelous cameraman, because if you look at that film, you get that plane. From that plane, that's one single shot that comes down it's incredible. Comes down the flagpole, hits the top of the building that's got the angel on, goes down the whole building, hits the freeway, goes down the freeway, and that's one single shot. And I said to someone, and I showed it to a film person. He said, "God, that's a great shot." And I said, "Oh, who did that?" And I said, "Well, it was so-and-so, and he shot it on 30 mil. And he said, "He's the best cameraman in England." He said, "You were lucky."
You were saying just a moment ago how the ideas and process of making films fed into your other work. Yeah. And you were sort of saying before we watched the films how one of the films, Change, came out of the exhibition at the Whitechapel, and then also how there was, is it 16 Situations, the artist book that you made? Yeah. And yes. And that was about sort of objects and them being placed in different locations and a kind of
Correct,
montage.
Yeah.
So I was just sort of wondering, there's obviously quite a dynamic relationship between all your films and your different parts of your art practice. And I just was wondering, is it strange to just see them devoid of that larger context? And because we're a cinema organisation, so we're just seeing the films here, whereas there's a kind of relationships with all these other things.
Yeah, I mean, when I teach, I try to tell students to get involved in different disciplines. It's always a thing that art schools want to do but never do. If you're in one department and you go to the film department and say, "Oh, I'm a sculptor and I want to make a film." "Oh, yeah. Well, can I borrow a film?" "Well, all the film school students want the cameras and stuff." So, but it does work. Yes, it did feedback. I did change. The reason I did Change really was because I made films before. If I wouldn't have done Change, which was a series of 200 images that were only 4 inches by 6 inches, and there were 200 of them, and they morphed into each other. They progressed, and they morphed. That wouldn't happen if I hadn't known what storyboards were. I mean, there were more than storyboards. I had actual objects in them, but I learned a lot from film. It was.
But did you because there were, although experimental films had been made before, these were the Link was the first film to be funded by the Arts Council, and with Vertical. I mean, did you conceive of this as an artist film that would somehow be different to other types of films, or?
No,
were you sort of trying something out?
No, I can see that there's maybe the difference between oil painting and watercolor. It was just another medium to deal with. You know, I didn't look at it in a sort of filmatic way, really. I mean, I did. I was fascinated with what the camera could do and how one might use it.